Welcome back to Beyond the Wrench. My name is Jay Goninen, and I am your host. On today's show, we welcome Russ Green. Russ is the operations officer at Machinery Advisors Consortium and has seen a lot over the course of his career that has allowed him to educate equipment dealers all over the place. On top of what he does with Mac, he's got a bunch of different stuff going on that we'll talk about here today. And I know just in my prior conversations how much I learn every time I talk to Russ, and I can't wait to have him be able to talk to all of you because there's just so much knowledge that comes along with Russ. So how you doing today, Russ?
You're too gracious. You're too gracious. I'm great. I'm great. I am remote. More so than normal, Jay. I reside in Lexington, Kentucky, and over the last 10 days, I've relocated my zip code to the East Coast to be close to a couple of my sons here in Virginia. So I think our friendship's just slightly less than 2 years old, but the relationship's mutual. Anytime I get a chance to meet someone who's just passionate about what they're doing and doing something new and different, connecting people in a new and different way, that kind of winds my stem. So I'm glad that we're spending this time together.
Me too. And when I say you've spent some time in the industry, roughly how long have you been in the industry?
Oh, my geez, you never ask a lady her age. I don't know why I'd ask a man. But yeah, I'm pushing 5 decades. I'm pushing 5 decades in the game. I started my career as a teacher and a coach, and I taught in the high school system in Iowa, and coached a tennis program, girls tennis program that really was a little bit more of a chaperone than a coach, and uh, and then got in the industry in 1975 with International Harvester as a trainee. And I was, because of some circumstances of how they applied me into a United Way campaign, I was actually probably International Harvester's longest trained trainee through 75 and through 76, and went into the industry at that time on the ag side. And as you say, from there to here is not a straight line. Absolutely not a straight line. I've been with four agricultural companies, three of them offshore companies, companies that have come into North America, and four of them have employed me. Pardon me, of the four, three of them have employed me twice. So I went from International Harvester to Kloss, the German company, to Kubota, then very much thought of as a Japanese company. And then the Deutz company, the German company, purchased Alice Chalmers, and they called it Deutz Alice. So by the time I was 34, 35 years old, I'd been with uh, an icon, International Harvester, one of the most renowned global brands in the agricultural industry, and now has over time morphed into CNH, CNH Industrial, publicly traded. And then Kloss is a family-held company at Kloss. It was a little bit more like becoming a member of the family than it was becoming an employee. And Helmut Kloss lived to be in his 90s and managed that business. Katrina, his daughter, is the general counsel today that leads that business. Then with Kubota, and Kubota's changed a lot from my tenure back in the 80s with a company that a lot of people were hard to pronounce their name, let alone become what I would call the Kleenex tissue of compact tractors today. The brand is just very, very strong. And then Deutz Alice, and that boils into at today's company, AGCO, publicly traded. My last 8 years as a W-2 earner were with AGCO, and then bringing the Fendt brand into North America. So I've been one of the ones that's been blessed. It's not that like I said, the career wasn't a straight line, but I got to apply what I would say common sense and branding and marketing characteristics to those different environments. And particularly interesting when you bring an international company like Kloss, like Kubota, like the Fendt brand of AGCO into North America. There's not a recipe. There's not a roadmap you can follow that's going to be the same for each brand. And I'm sure that in the automotive industry that you're very comfortable with, whether it's Audi or whether it's Hyundai or Kia or any of the brands that come on shore, there's things they have to learn, and there's things they teach, because obviously to come on shore and be successful, there's got to be something in that marketing brand promise that works.
How much has the industry changed over the years? And I think it's easy to say, well, it's changed a lot, of course, but I'm interested in your experience over several decades. What's changed? What's remained the same?
Okay, I'll sound a little bit like a dinosaur maybe when I express this, but uh, the automotive versus the off-highway business is, first of all, few people recognize the agricultural or the industrial construction business as a B2B business. You know, the users use your product, but they use it to make money. So you're doing business to a business. And in the automotive, maybe even light truck business, it's more B2C. You're selling to an end user or customer that uses that for their personal gratification, their transportation, their ease, stature. It maybe shows a stature. And in the agricultural side, it's always been a relationship business because your customers are not portable. They own land, and that's their resource, and that's their valuable resource. So they're not hard to find. They're not hard to find. They're on their land, and it's cyclical. Every year is a cycle of preparing and planting and nourishing and spraying and harvesting and so that cycle. So you understand the cadence of your cycle, whether it's a Texas cycle, a Maine cycle, a Canadian cycle. There's a cycle, and you get used to it. I think the greatest differentiator today, and a nice article was written. There was an article written, and the headline said, "Never before has the technology in agriculture moved this fast, and it'll never move this slow again." And the digitization that happens. I got my first cell phone when I was 39 years old. I mean, today young people get one at baptism. And after they get that cell phone, they know how to use it, whether it's in texting, whether it's in methods of communicating, apps on their phone that give. I mean, if I wanted to know what the weather was going to be tomorrow, I had to go to the Des Moines Register and open the third page and look at what the weather forecast was, and that probably took me 8 minutes. Today, in 8 seconds, you know whether to buy a raincoat or not. I mean, you get an app for that, and you know when you can open up the racetrack for NASCAR or when you can shut down the golf course for the PGA. I mean, almost to the second, the digitization. And so at MAC, at the Machinery Advisors Consortium, of course, the first machine age was industrialization and mechanical power replacing animal power, human power. And that happened from one would argue from automobiles of the teens all the way through. It's interesting. Tractors replaced horses on the farm while I'm alive. In 1954, the number of tractors on farms exceeded the number of animal power, whether it's horse or oxen. And today, the next generation, we talk about the second machine age is going to be that of digitization and the way we move communication and the way communication helps us to make decisions. We can get all kinds of information, but that information has to be in a manner that we can decide something from it. So I think that's the biggest thing is that agriculture is a stationary business. I own the land, and I've got people that are going to support me with my mechanization and my parts and my service and all the things that helps me succeed with agriculture. And it could be grain agriculture, it could be animal agriculture, and it could be large. And there is a lot of consolidation. There's unquestionable the large are getting larger, but the differentiation of the small and a place for the small farms that have a differentiated value where maybe they go from the farm gate to the dinner plate with a controlled vertical marketing approach where it's delivered. So there's going to be a lot of demands on agriculture for safety, security, and abundance of food. We all look back at COVID 2020 and when housewives and house husbands went to the store and they couldn't get the food they wanted or preferred, or they couldn't get the paper products they needed. I mean, it was a WTF. I mean, hey, what's happened? What's with the fragility of our supply channel, and why can't I get what I need and want? And can you imagine in Eastern Europe today with the controversy of the Ukrainian controversy and the number of harvested acres being reduced there is going to create hunger issues throughout that Mediterranean and African area. So a lot of political the political strife is amplified by the speed of when we know it. And if a gunshot goes off in Israel today, we see the smoke stain today. It's just so relationships, digital connectivity, technology, and the speed of knowledge. If it doubles every year, here I am, 72 years old. I've seen 72 doublings, I guess.
Well, and I think one of the beauties of your background is that over the course of the years, you've seen so many different dealerships, so many different types of dealerships and how they're run. And I'm sure you've seen a little bit of the good, the bad, and the ugly, and being able to kind of take your learnings over the years and really kind of collect them and use your experience to better educate the dealerships that are out there today. Because I know from my experience in being a rep, that was one of the things I'm most grateful for is the ability to go into different types of dealerships. And even though they might be under the same brand umbrella, going into them and seeing how differently so many of them operate is kind of eye opening at times. But I think there's so much you learn just from seeing a variety of different shops and dealerships. Am I correct?
You are correct. I'll use the word patriarchal. Uh, I'm dealing in my millennial young group with the grandchildren of people I sold to. All right, so I've been able to see three generations, and not unlike I think automotive, although automotive moves so quickly, you could have corporations expanding and owning multiple brands and doing their work with multiple brands. In the off-road agricultural area, you would see a second, third generation of a family running the business, and grandfather or great grandfather worked off of skin knuckles and hard work, 26 hours a day. They'd find a way to work in the shop, they'd find a way to work behind the parts counter, and they were trusted, and they sold to people after church, right? And they're in the community. And then their children come back, and hopefully father or mother haven't spoiled them on the interest and the passion for doing that job and doing that work, because uh, they've built a financial wealth, but they've built a goodwill, community wealth that's immeasurable. You can't put a price tag on it. So now the second generation comes in now, and then a third generation. And it's always interesting to see how far the apple falls from the tree. How good is the grandson or granddaughter compared to the grandfather as they started this business, and look at all the changes in technology, look at all the changes in the workforce, look at all the expectations. There, when I started, if you were good at what you did it for life, and there wasn't the portability, the mobility. You didn't move around. You became a part of the community, a big part of the community. And today's young people, I think what I observe, Jay, is they decide where they want to be before they decide what they want to be. They want to be in a geography. And if you want to be in a mountain state, you better not select Kansas as your home, right? You better move further west in the mountains of Colorado or Wyoming. If you want to be near the beach, again, Kansas isn't your place to be if you want to be near the beach. So they choose where they want to be. I have a high school age grandson now who's choosing his college vocation, and he has high aspirations of, unfortunately he wants to be a lawyer. I hope that changes over time, but it's his chosen vocation today. But he's so worldly. He is. When I chose my college direction, my parents were not college educated. They were glad I got out of high school, glad I had, wasn't yet arrested. And I wanted to go off and be a teacher and a coach at a state school. And I thought that was an adventure. Today, that would put most kids to sleep. If they don't go to a school where in their second or third year they get an offshore experience where they can get go into Europe, go into South America, go into the Asian countries, and get that multiple experiences, and that's good. That's healthy, because today's agricultural society is a global society. Today's automotive business is global. Think of the parts and components that come from multiple continents. So I wander a little bit, but I think today's young people are so much more rounded because of what they get experienced to and what they see in both a real and digital manner that my generation hadn't been exposed to yet. But I do believe that I'll make a general statement that'll upset a lot of people, but I don't know that we've been the best parents in the world. Now, sometimes we're so busy doing our work and running our businesses that we forget to be parents and kind of give that guidance. I look back and did a lot of in my young age, I did a lot of youth coaching of my kids as they grew up. But even me, moving, my wife and I are in our 15th home, and there are a lot of relocations, a lot of changes, and you lose family time when that happens. My children, tap roots are down. They're where they want to be. They're not relocating anywhere. They're going to be part of the community, part of the church, part of their business. Their families are good. It's just, but they selected where they wanted to be just at the same time they elected what they wanted to be.
And I think there's been so much that's happened generationally, and that is, as it relates to that dealership up there, I think a lot of them feel that same thing, right? Where they at one point were used to that loyal employee that was going to stick with them from the time that they started to their retirement. And when you look at data now, I think the average stay, and this was of a millennial, was less than 4 years at a job, right? And so when 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 industry looks at that, it can be off-putting, and maybe you look at that person that's been at a different job every 2 or 3 years, and in your head you think that they're a job jumper, but in reality that aligns with really what the data says overall. I do think the ag world maybe has a little bit more longevity in how long an employee stays, just because it is kind of a lifestyle, right? If you've grown up in that, it's kind of what you're used to. And I used to say when I was back on the equipment side that, I think the general young person, you know, they didn't want to work Saturdays, but maybe that kid that grew up on a farm was just happy they didn't have to work on Sundays. And there was a big difference between how they were brought up a little bit.
You're right. You're right. You're right. And the industry that I think of this the most is I think of the dairy industry. If you grew up on a dairy farm and you knew the work of a dairy 7 days a week, 2 and 3 times a day, and it makes Groundhog Day the movie look like Ned and the First Grade Reader because it's just repetitive, repetitive, repetitive. But but I think that makes it incumbent upon the leadership of a business and the human resource structure of a business to understand that. I'm not going to say they're hungry for more. And my years was 6 years, yours was 4 years. They're close enough. If you're not giving that person, that millennial person, a new challenge, then somebody else will. And that doesn't mean that you've got to promote them. That means that maybe you move them from a department to department, and that you clearly communicate your feelings about them. You can understand in the first 3 to 4 years of employment of a person whether or not they're going to grow into a significant leader, potentially a department leader of your enterprise, maybe even beyond a department leader, and maybe someday be plan B for you to sell your business to. They're going to be that new point, particularly if you don't have a plan A. If there's not the obvious family member or sibling that's going to step into your role. I mean, we've had a lot of dealers in the 90s discouraged their people from coming back into the business because it was that hard work. And now with technology, I was watching a movie of one of my millennials who was bored to tears sitting in the seat of his $400,000 tractor because he didn't have decisions to make. They're all being made for him electronically from the technology that's in the unit. So that means what you need to do is you need to be an open communicator with your organization. If you've got winners in your organization that you want them to be 30 and 40-year employees, map out their future. And what you may find, we have a Venn diagram in our modeling. We talk about people and processes and technology. And it's where people meet processes that you can scale your business. If you've got good people doing good things with a process, You may be the buyer and the expander of your business into new markets, into new geographies, as opposed to the one that wants to be bought because I don't have a plan B. I don't have the people that are interested in acquiring this business think it's too much risk or too high a cost. So I think whether it's in the automotive business, the industrial business, the ag business, you're either the minnow or the shark. You're the one that's sharp enough that you're planning your business so that you can expand because you know the intersectionality of people to processes and people to technology and technology to processes so that you're automating and moving in a way that you can get more work done faster than your competitor. You've used the processes, you've automated them through technology, and now you can be bigger and bring people in. Another thing that's happening, Jay, and I'm not going to tell you I'm an expert at it. There are a number of the agricultural enterprises, large ones, large enterprises that are ESOPs, employee stock option plans in their businesses, and the employees own the business. So that broadens the responsibility of an employee, that you're not only an employee and you're on a W-2 paycheck from this place, but you may be asked to help make some decisions as significant as who are your board of directors. You vote on who's the board, who's speaking, and you may have a multi 22-year employee on that group, and you may vote a 2-year employee onto that group as to making decisions for your company. So you can't. We write in Mac, we write a lot about dealer culture. We write a lot about defining your mission, vision, values, and expressing those and narrowing the distance from your boardroom to your break room. And you can imagine a dealer that might have multiple locations, and it's not uncommon today that in the ag space, I think John Deere's average is 12 locations for each of their corporations. And that's 12 different satellites that are working off of a corporation, incumbent upon the leadership team and the human resource team to make sure that those 12 locations behave like one, without losing individuality, without losing inspiration and passion, but having a culture that binds them together. And you might move a service manager, or maybe you move an assistant parts manager in one location who's demonstrating superior power to perform as a supervisor. That individual may move to another location as a service leader. We've got numerous black marks of where the best technician doesn't necessarily make the best shop manager, and you get it's a lose-lose situation. You've lost your technician, and now you got a bad shop manager, and you probably express that more often than not. But you can't over communicate your expectations, and you can't overestimate the life's journey that you see your leaders walking through in your organization.
You hit on something that I think is really important to maybe dig into a little further, and that was being able to understand those key players that have potential to do more, right? And I think a lot of times where I see service departments do a poor job of is raising that next generation service manager. And a lot of times they do promote that best technician to be their manager. And so when you look at that, are there opportunities to really go out, find those key players early on, get them some of the soft skills or business training that they need to prepare them rather than kind of throwing them to the fire like I see a lot of times throughout our industry?
I think that's a key attribute of the best leaders. I really do. It's one thing to identify them. It's a second thing to reward them, so that you retain them. And again, my colleague George Russell, and you know George well. One of the things he dwells on is the personal aspect of the extrovert and the introvert. There are more introverts in the corner office and boardrooms today than there are extroverts. And if you do the DISC model, by the DISC model, the placement on the DISC, there's more people that are introverts. And you've got to let an introvert express himself slowly, and maybe giving them multiple opportunities to meet with you one-on-one, one-on-two, four eyes approach. And, what do they see in your operation that can be improved? How would they improve it? and what's their role in life? What do they want to be? Do they want to be that person making changes and implementing new changes in an organization? And how would they do that? And the highest compliment you can pay anyone is ask them their opinion. But when you ask it, step back and let them express it. I'm an extrovert. I can think and talk at the same time. My DISC assessment proves that. But not everybody is. Not everybody expresses themselves aggressively and voicefully. They just express differently, and you got to hear that out so that you're not suffocating or talking over or discounting that quiet person because they're quiet. And in fact, oftentimes, and this is one of the moderation of a meeting characteristic too, is never pass on the quiet person in the room, because they might be the best listener, the best concentrator and calculating of options and alternatives. And when you ask them what they think, listen, stop and let them vent themselves through. And I think that's the thing. In an environment of, I just think automotive dealerships, things move so fast. I was just in my last automotive dealership last Friday, and I'm visiting. It's not the dealership I bought my vehicle from. It's a Chrysler dealership, got a Jeep, and it needs service for simple things, not tune up, but a oil change such. And a real difference between this dealership in a metropolitan area of Virginia and my dealership in a metropolitan area of Kentucky. It was like, how do you work here? Can I just drive up and get a fast, oil change, fast lane? Nope, got to have an appointment. Okay, I said, what are your openings? And he said, we've got 3 for next week. What? You got 3? Now I'm anchored down to 3 choices a week out when I can't. I don't get up in the morning and know where I'm going to get my breakfast. Yeah, okay, so I set this timing. So now I'm anchored down on a point here in Virginia that I've got to get my service work done. If I were back in my environment, I'd probably do a text message to the service leader of that dealership. And I'd text Leroy and say, hey, Jeep's ready for that oil change. Give me my options. What I'd like to do is be there at 1 o'clock Tuesday. And he says, you're scheduled in. Now, that guy may move some things around. He may have, had a full 1 o'clock Tuesday calendar, but he didn't let me know that. He's going to make things work, that he's got a 1 o'clock on Tuesday that it could be done at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, and he's going to move them on down the list. And then I'll come, because I'll go and wait for my vehicle. I'm a retired guy. I got nothing but time. If you're a household with 2 employees and both cars are necessary and you both have jobs you got to drive to, I kind of get the appointment scheme a little bit better. I have a lot more flexibility, but those are just cultural changes. I felt more, I didn't feel as welcome as where I went last Friday, but that's natural. I haven't bought a vehicle from them, and they don't know me from any other somebody vacationing in Williamsburg. But I think there's a technique, particularly in the automotive space, where when a customer arrives, you've got to make them feel like they're the only person on the planet. Nothing else matters but them right now. And if you're asking me for an oil change, you may be asking me for a quote on a Jeep Wagoneer, and get out your checkbook. But you got to make them feel like, yeah, I got time for you. I'm listening to you. And let's make sure that you're happy, because I work here. I'm always happy. So you got to make that person feel welcome. And I think that's in ag, the differentiation is, as I go back to the B2B, and ag, we're a business to business environment, is cyclical. And if it's harvest time, most of your customers are on high pressure standby. They got to get the harvest done. They're working against the weather. They're working against mechanical breakdowns. They're working against the labor force. They're working against the commodities market that's going up and down like a yo-yo. They got a lot of things on their mind. It's really, really hard to make an agriculturalist during the peak stress periods of time of the harvest or the spring seeding. Those 2 6-week, 9-week cycles are what stresses the agribusiness man. But I ramble a little bit, but I think that
Yeah.
deals. Yeah, I think that deals with picking out the people. If you can't diffuse the anger of a customer, you're probably not going to be strong in the agricultural world, because there's times of the year when they get really angry because something broke at the most inopportune time. In the automotive world, I don't know, if transmission goes out, well, here's our loaner fleet. We'll give you a loaner for the week and we'll fix your transmission and you keep driving, right? Well, there's not a loaner $1 million combine sitting there for Leroy to have when his combine's broken down. You gotta go. You gotta fix this one now, because it's got my monitors in it. It's got my setup in it. I've got my trucks keyed to that particular speed. So just a different mindset of the customer. And I think construction, same way, they got to move dirt. They're building roads. They're going all the while. And when you want to service a construction piece of machinery, you service between 1 o'clock at night and 3 o'clock in the morning, because I don't have any operators there. You can come service it then. But at 5 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, I got somebody moving dirt. Don't get in our way. Don't get in our way.
This week's episode of Beyond the Wrench is brought to us by Jasper Engines and Transmissions. Okay, your customer's engine or transmission has failed, but now is not the time for them to trade their vehicle. Not without a working engine or transmission. Besides, would they have kept their vehicle another 3 to 5 years if their engine or transmission had not let them down? If you answered yes, then Jasper Engines and Transmissions is your choice to give your customer's vehicle new life and many thousands of miles of enjoyable driving performance. When considering the high cost of a new or newer used vehicle, there's a pretty good case to be made for replacing a drivetrain component that has failed or is delivering poor performance. Rather than trading their car, truck, van, or SUV, install a quality remanufactured Jasper product for less than your customer would have to invest in a new vehicle or a newer used vehicle. Check out their website at jasperengines.com to learn more about the money-saving value of Jasper. All right, so as we look at some of the struggles we have, maybe you've got that shop that's got bad turnover, or we see the technicians almost becoming a revolving door of people in the shop. And I think we've all seen service departments that run that way. And a lot of times you walk in the shop and you don't know anybody every time you go in there. And that's always a struggle. And I think one of the core issues that we have that creates that is that we haven't trained that person into a level of leadership that they should be trained. And maybe they came from that technical background into that management position. And it's, as you mentioned, with all of the different pressures that go into maintaining a service department on the ag side, there's a lot of pressure. And, I've had technicians make that transition under me in the past. And I think a lot of times until they're in that seat, you don't know how they're going to handle it. They don't know how they're going to handle it a lot of times. So being able to give adequate training to that person is really, really important, because if you don't, a really big reason as to why we face some of the attrition we do, if you are that shop that has that high turnover rate, is maybe because they're not in love with their supervisor, their manager, right? And a lot of times maybe that's because they go into that seat and they're thinking that they're going to run the shop the same way that their manager ran the shop. And generationally, as we go down, maybe that management style hasn't translated, right? I think that's really, really changed over the years. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are there. If that staffing has, and maybe that turnover has a direct reflection to the leadership and how they're being led.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Undoubtedly. You're hitting a point that I think is, again, I go back to the leaders, the owners of the organization. When that becomes evident, then they need to take action. Two studies. Number one, first study says that it's frequent that employees leave their supervisor, not their job. Now they change their careers because of how they're led or how they're supervised or how they're motivated, not because they don't want to be in the job they're in. They end up going in the same job in another employment. there's another study that says that individuals that are in a supervisory role are giving their first supervisory responsibility at age 33. At age 33, they're now starting to supervise people. On the average age that people get leadership training is 42, right? You're supervising people at 33, but you don't get trained to there's, on the averages, again, there's a bell curve, but that's a 9-year spread. You've managed somebody without understanding what management's about, particularly when you have multiple personalities and you have multiple skill sets and you have the criticality of different technical jobs. You have some people that work on what I would call the routine and the ease of an automotive job, and there are others that are doing the things that are diagnostic and delving into drivetrain and motor issues as such. And certainly the diagnostic characteristics today are different because of the electronics and how you can, it's a different methodology of how it's done. Now you flip that to agricultural. You have certain people that like the harvest and they do work on harvesting machines. You have other people that like planting and all of the nuances and all of the calculations and such that have to go in through the populations and fertilizations and controls. And they like the spring. So you've got to know what, again, part of being a leader is to know what your followers are like and have that empathy for their position. I speak of dimensions of leadership, Jay, and the base dimensions and character of a leader are trust and empathy, generosity and respect. And trust means that, when a person enters a role, they have your trust automatically until they don't. And then there's some people want your trust to be earned. All right. And empathy means what the challenges are of that job. That the challenges of a new employee who's learning the culture of the shop and who the social leader is of the shop and where the tools are kept in the shop and what the expectations are of the shop. And you have an empathy for that. And that empathy extends beyond the workplace, and you understand what that individual's home life or community life might be like as well. Doesn't mean you control it, but the generosity is time, not money. Being generous with your time and making sure the onboarding process, you just don't assume that everybody's onboarded at the same pace with the same skill sets. You've got to be generous with your time. And then respect, I think that just goes without saying. Everybody's position has to be respected. You have to respect. You can, the person that's chronically late to work, but there's a child care seat in the back of their car, you kind of know that maybe that individual may have to do a drop off of their child to child care, and not every day is that a sweet, 8 o'clock deal. And then as you get that premise, if you get the premise of trusting and respect, generosity, and empathy, then you kind of align with motivation and alignment of your growth. In other words, what are we doing as a dealership here? Are we sustaining ourselves and we're going to work on Chevrolet cars for the rest of our lives, or is this, by the way, we work on Chevrolet cars, and I'm this is an organization that's going to grow, and we're going to grow under General Motors, and we're going to have a Buick Cadillac dealership, we're going to have a light truck dealer, who knows, but that needs to be communicated. And the other dimension of leadership in the value channel is innovation and tenacity. The people that will work the extra hour when you ask them. Your workloads get so hard, instead of a 45-hour week, it's going to be a 50-hour week this week, and I'm going to need some people because we're jammed up. We've got a lot more business than we got technician, or I lose a technician. And now how are we going to cover those hours that individual, you meet with them, you say, hey, everybody, we've committed to a workload of this kind of work. We put out this many cars on the street productively selling every month. So that means we got to have that many preps, that many trades, that many, and lo and behold, one of our technicians broke his leg ice skating, or who knows what. So now we gotta. So you don't tell people what they have to do. You ask them what they want to do, and then you find the ones that raise their hand and say, I can do that. I'm at a point. I'm not a duck hunter. I'm not a deer hunter. I'm not a fisherman. Golf season's over. I can do that. I'll step up. So those are the kind of communications that happen, and then the innovative piece. If you talk about the dimension of generosity and respect, innovation and trust, the grit, take time to ask people how you would improve their work. You know, the again, I think I said earlier, the best thing you could ask somebody is their opinion, and then the worst thing you can do is not listen to it. So if you have a person in a workstation and if they're not smiling when you walk by as a leader or as a supervisor, something's wrong. And you need to ask the question, why? What's up? Not getting your parts on time, or you got a vehicle in a bay and you've ordered parts and the parts aren't here, and now you can't work in that bay. You got to work in the second bay, and lo and behold, the parts are behind on that too. Now you got two bays tied up, and what's your problem? And this let's articulate it and this fix the problem. I Again, back to an article I wrote about the smile dial, and it was flying your dealership to new heights. And I equated the dealership's key performance indicator, the dashboard, if you will, to a cockpit of an airplane. I mean, if ever you phone commercial, you look at a cockpit of an airplane, you just hope that all those things are working, and because there's hundreds of dials in there. The dial I say for a supervisor is walk your workplace, whether it could be the dealer. Every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, walk through your workplace and see how long it takes you to count 10 smiles. And when you confront the first frown, what's up? Is it a business deal? Is it a family deal? Is it a community deal? Why aren't you smiling today? Why aren't you in a good place? And then fix it, because you got the power to fix it. It may not be immediate, and it may not be just, turn a dial and you got it fixed, but you've gotta listen, and you can listen with your eyes. You can listen with your eyes. You can see when things aren't flowing in a good way. So yeah, employees that leave are probably not dissatisfied with the job. They're probably dissatisfied with supervision. So how do we spend time making leaders, giving them both the hard and soft skills? What are our KPIs that we're going to watch? And every week, here's your dashboard of work completed, profitability on the work, but there's soft skills about making sure that your people you want to be not the dealer of choice. You don't want to be the dealer. That's competitive to whether General Motors to Ford or whatever. You want to be the employer of choice. You want to be the place where people come to work and they encourage other friends. You want to work here. This is a good place. We got people that care. We're well directed. We got the tools that we need. We got the time that we need. We're really valued as an employee. Yeah, you think about working here, and there'll be people. Money is not always the guiding light here. Certainly everybody's got a budget to work with at home, and you want to be competitive. You don't want to be, you don't want to be 80% of the competitive price tag, or you're not going to get them in the first place. But if you're competitive in your compensation plan, and find out those people that value time more than money. And if I value my time with my family traveling in a camper, better make sure I get that time valued, and there's a meeting of the expectations. Certain disciplines are pretty functional, and one size does meet all with processes, but you need to show the kind of flexibility that shows that you have trust, empathy, generosity, and respect to your employees. And I think those things will pay you dividends in that, bringing the boardroom closer to the break room.
Is your shop looking to fill open positions or grow your bench of candidates? Consider adding WrenchWay to your recruiting efforts. WrenchWay helps shops and dealerships all across the U.S. find better qualified candidates for their service centers. WrenchWay Top Shop memberships are only $150 per month and include unlimited job postings on the best job board in the industry, a guarantee of 10 qualified applicants, and the shops choose who is considered qualified, access to connect with and help over 650 high schools and post-secondary schools, and much more. Learn more about WrenchWay's Top Shop memberships by visiting WrenchWay.com and selecting the For Shops tab under the Solutions dropdown. Link is in the show notes. I think one of the mistakes that a lot of new managers make, especially when they come from that technical side, is that they come in almost demanding the respect, right? Or they think that the respect is just going to come as a result of them sitting in that seat. And they don't understand that it is a process, that it takes time for people to feel you out and make sure that they feel comfortable understanding that you know what you're doing. And I think I was guilty of this early in my career, right? Coming in guns a-blazing, I'm this manager. As a young manager, I think at times you feel like you know more than you really do. And I'm probably as guilty of that as anybody out there. And I guess a bit of advice that I might have for somebody that's coming up in the ranks or that wants to go to that manager level is, when you go into that role, know that a big part of your job to start off with is just to get to know the people, to really start to develop trust with those folks, which doesn't come overnight. I think a lot of us think that comes a lot faster than it actually does, but it comes from those people at your team being able to see you do things and be able to see you, maybe you make a mistake and admit to that mistake and own up to it rather than trying to hide around it. But, I think for that person that's coming up in a shop, just know that, like, when you go into that role, it is a different role. It's a different mindset. It's a different skill set in a lot of ways, and you have to adapt, and it's not easy to do. So don't go in just thinking that everybody's going to respect you as much as you think they should until you earn it. And that can be one of the hardest things for a young manager in my eyes.
Yeah, you're right. And two comments I'll make to that is, go back to the empathy. You got to be empathetic about knowing what is the demands or the pressures, the expectations on the employee. And in a workplace environment, there's the appointed leader and there's the social leader. In a shop, and that social leader doesn't have to be the person with the most seniority. And again, it's the person that empathizes with those around them, listens to those around them, helps those around them. Seldom has rework. Their work's very efficient, very effective. They get along with everyone, and that's the social leader that I take my problems to. And it's not uncommon that the social leader will know of the unrest in a department before the appointed leader does. And particularly if you're a behind the desk manager and you don't get out in your work environment and you follow what's going on with your eyes. And every key performance indicator is an indication of some friction or some misconnect in your process. And then have the people help figure out the smoothing of the process, because they're probably not any more happy with the mistakes that might be made, or the speed with which work gets done, or the accuracy with which it gets done, or the profitability at the end of the work than you might be. So you work together. So you're right. You can, and particularly when leaders come from outside the organization, if the leadership isn't homegrown and isn't organic, and you don't see somebody practically move through the organization as they earn their way, and they come from the outside in, there's a reason that person didn't do well in their last job, right? Why did they leave it? And they may find out, well, it's no wonder that guy's here. He's a job jumper. He's into his fourth leadership in the last 5 years. He can't keep work either. And there's probably some toxicity to that. So, yeah, I think that understanding that just because you're the appointed leader doesn't make you, just because you're the boss and you've got the name placard on your desk, doesn't make you the leader. Leadership is earned. Leadership is earned. Positions are given, but leadership is earned beyond that. You're not given a leadership role. You're given a position of support and superiority. And now it's your job to be a leader, your job to work yourself into that leadership.
I think that's what OEs do such a good job at, right? In anybody that's worked at the manufacturer level has probably seen it, where I think OEs do a great job of selecting that probably ideally younger person, and they move them around the country. They move them into different jobs. They move them into different sectors or different parts of the industry. And what they're doing is really trying to get them really well rounded so that when they are in that upper leadership position, they understand the positions because they've sat in those positions. And I think you see a lot of maybe next generation owners of these dealerships that are doing the same thing, right? They're spending time in parts, they're spending time in service, they're spending time setting up equipment, they're spending time in sales and marketing. And I think for those of you that have that ability to do that, I think there's a lot of value in that and seeing all sides of a dealership and how it's run. Because then when you are in that leadership position, there are just so many things you can pull from each side. And say you're just going to go be, say you want to be a service manager, right? And maybe you spend a little time in the sales department. That could help with that relationship because you deal with the sales department a lot on trades and inspecting equipment and that type of thing. To even have the rapport with those people to feel comfortable going back and forth, spending some time in their department can be hugely beneficial.
It's absolutely essential. Absolutely essential. And you're right. Uh, if you're going to be a GM, a general manager now, and you're going to bring together the functionality of your sales department, new and used, your parts operation, your rental operation, your service operation, maybe your truck fleet. You've got there's organizations that do an excellent job of getting you. They don't want you to be an expert at it, but they want you to have enough knowledge about it that you understand the process system, you understand the pass offs. We at Mac talk about it's not the service department or the parts department. It's it's the parts sales department. They're selling something all the while. A customer comes in and wants part A. Well, they leave with part A, and by the way, they've upsold them to parts B and C at the same time because they know those are essential to getting part A to work properly. The service department, the biggest customer of the parts department is the service department. And they need to make sure that there's a continuity that you don't miss an order. If I've diagnosed the problem of this vehicle and we don't have the characteristic parts in stock that repair that vehicle, today's expectation is no more than 48 hours. I mean, and almost in a day you can get a part from anywhere, particularly with today's structures. So but the only reason I'm without a part 72 hours is the knuckleheads forgot to order it, or it wasn't communicated well on that I needed that part to make this job complete. So how do you get that continuity? And until you've walked a mile in their shoes, do you understand the pain point? Do you understand how critical it is that at the end of each diagnosis, this is the list of parts we need for this job. These we have on the shelf. These we got to order. And by the way, give the customer the option to, is this a job that you need done in 24 hours? If you allow us to order the part in our standard order writing program or daily order writing program, the freight on is free. But if you want this done in 24 hours, you're going to have to pay the freight on the part. Well, let the customer make that decision. They'll tell you how urgent they need that vehicle or that piece back. So that's the openness that you have, not only horizontally between parts and sales and service and whole goods, but vertically between the internal organization and the external, the customer. The customers, oftentimes, if particularly when you have fleets, if you have there's few farmers that have one pickup truck. There's very few farmers that have one tractor. And given the time that we're not in the season where that particular one tractor is fitted with all the technology and all the electronics and all the controls I need for planting, I need that back yesterday. So yeah, I'll pay for the freight on any part that I need on that particular piece of equipment because I can't go without it. If it's one of my tractors I'm doing tillage with and it's a hitch pin behind, I'll give you 5 days to get that one back to me. because I now know it's going to take 5 days. Don't take 6, but we both agreed that you're going to get apart. It's going to come in a different manner. So having that, and today it's interesting too, Jay. You got to know the customer that wants to see your nose. You got the customer that wants to talk to you by touching your nose and your eyeballs, and you have a dialogue, and that customer that wants you to send him a text message, and that's all I want is send me that text message, 50 words or less. Tell me what you're doing. Give me a date. That's all I need to know. Don't bother me, and I'll read my text message when I want to read it, and you'll send it when you want to send it, and I'm fine with that because I got 1,000 things to do, and I'm worried about whether or not I get my tractor back at noon tomorrow or noon Thursday. That's not one of them. That's not one of them. So I think that communication device is it. We're learning that. We're learning what customers want a phone call, what customers are good with a text message, and what customers want to see your white truck drive up the lane and talk to them. And by the way, there's fewer and fewer and fewer with the white truck up the lane. They're just that busy. This is not a, if I want to, and by the way, coffee shops, not they're not going to coffee shops. Those B2B customers, they're so wrapped up in the decisions they make every day. But and you talk about leadership. I'm going to pivot a little bit. I've got a group. I
Yeah.
call it McKeven. It's a group of the next generation of ag leaders. So when I got my last W-2 form in 2021, I said I don't want to get out of this gig. I want to pay forward, give back. So I put together 10 young people that were second, third, fourth generation parents or grandparents business. And I was going to do a newsletter. I was going to do a call once a month, and then we're going to do a collective Zoom once a month. Well, as this thing got rolling and on the wheels, I realized, first of all, I didn't have the time, and they didn't want me to take the time to call them. We might create our own text environment. I wasn't very newsworthy, so the newsletters each month got to be burdensome, but we do call and have a Zoom call once a month. And of my original 10, what I call next generation of ag leaders, the initial 10, I have 4 of them still engaged. About 400 in the bigs, you get to go in the Hall of Fame. And each year I would add 4 more and add 4 more. So now I have 18 young people who are rock stars in the game. And I've got agronomists, I've got cattlemen, I've got marketers, I've got communication people. And once a month we get together at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Thursday, and we talk about what are the rocks on the road in agriculture, all the way from the farm gate to the dinner plate, because somewhere in there they're all involved. The important thing is each one of them is a leader, and they're some are leaders because they're in their parents' business, and that would make them an appointed leader, and others are developing a social leadership style. I've got associations in the group, and it's really intriguing. What this happens with me, Jay, is it keeps me relevant because they talk about things I should be knowing about, and I got a lot of time to research problems and bring problems to the table from a different perspective. So the McCaven piece does that. I wanted to capture some of it. One of my millennials and I said, let's capture this in a library. So I've got a Stratovation leadership library that has modules in it that we can train hard and soft leadership skills with it. And it got so cumbersome and bold. I said, why don't we give it away? So now I work with 26 collegiate students in agriculture from 21 land grant universities. Same thing. Once a month, I get these, maybe 18 of the 26, maybe 15 of the 26 are available when we make our calls. The same thing. We just talk about agriculture and why it's important to be an ag. If you want to be an accountant, be an ag accountant. Want to be a lawyer, be an ag lawyer. There's something to do from the farm gate to the dinner plate that involves all of us. So it's just a way for me to connect the dots, find out what's happening in the marketplace, stay ahead of some of the, talking about the farm bill, for example. I mean, goodness sakes, we're only 18 months late with our farm bill, and we'll probably be another 8 months late with it before we finally have one. And I just shake my head at the leadership that we have guiding our country. We need some young talent to step up pretty badly and move into a political leadership role. So we'll find if one of these collegiates or millennials fills that appetite after a while. But it keeps me passionate, excited about what I'm doing in ag. As long as I stay married to the same lady, I'm part owner of an Iowa farm. Not enough to put children to college, but enough to say I own part of an Iowa farm, and it's kind of it's kind of charming when you meet somebody at O'Hare Airport and say, well, what do you do? I got a farm in Iowa. Oh, really? Yeah. You own pigs? No, I don't own pigs. It's all great. It's all great. No, this is
Well,
a lot of things going on in our industry, and what you're doing and what we're doing. Like we weren't friends 2 years ago. We found out what you're doing and how you're moving talent around in the industry. We're doing the same thing. We're trying to raise talent so our societies are just better.
well, everybody at Mac does a fantastic job at it. I've learned so much from especially you and George over the years, and look forward to learning more and more as we build this relationship. And I just am such a huge fan of what you all do, and you in particular, the passion. You can tell every time I talk to you, it's there in spades, right? You always have a lot of energy for this industry, and yeah, it's.
We haven't told you about our mistakes. We haven't told you about the mistakes we've made. We just told you about the things we do well. If we started talking about the mistakes we made, your show would grow in length.
Well, hope to have you back on again at some point in the near future. It's always an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast and just to talk to you in general. Always really, really enjoy it, and a huge fan of what you do.
Feel mutually, my friend. Say hi to your team for us.
Thank you, Russ. Have a great day.
Good.
That wraps up another episode of Beyond the Wrench. If you liked this episode, please show your support by rating and following the podcast. You can also watch the video interviews on WrenchWay's YouTube channel. Speaking of WrenchWay, did you know Beyond the Wrench is managed and produced by the WrenchWay team? WrenchWay is an online community dedicated to promoting and improving automotive and diesel careers. We help technicians find the best shops to work at, and we also help auto, diesel, and CTE instructors get more support from local industry. You can learn more by visiting wrenchway.com.